Hey there, nightmare seekers. Welcome back to Silent Screams, your go-to channel for the most bone-chilling true stories that'll keep you up for weeks. Tonight, we're diving into a tale from our latest collection, Alone, terrifying true tales of home invasions and unseen intruders. Buckle up and maybe check your locks, because this one's gonna make you question every bump in the night. Don't say I didn't warn you. My name is Sarah, and I never thought I'd be sharing this story. Most days, I try to convince myself it was all just a bad dream. But the scars, both physical and mental, remind me that what happened that night was all too real. It started on a Friday evening in late October. I had just moved into my first apartment, a cozy little place on the third floor of an old Victorian house that had been converted into units. I was excited to have a weekend alone to unpack and settle in, maybe binge watch some horror movies to get into the Halloween spirit. As I was unpacking boxes in the living room, I heard a knock at the door. Thinking it might be one of my new neighbors coming to introduce themselves, I opened it without hesitation. Big mistake. There was no one there. Just an empty hallway, dimly lit by flickering fluorescent lights. I shrugged it off, chalking it up to kids playing pranks, and went back to unpacking. But then it happened again. And again. Each time, I'd open the door to find nothing but that empty, eerily silent hallway. By the fourth knock, I was starting to get annoyed. Real funny, guys. I called out, my voice echoing in the hallway. You can stop now. That's when I heard it. A giggle. Soft, high-pitched, coming from somewhere down the hall. But there was something off about it. It didn't sound like a child's laughter. It sounded wrong, somehow. Distorted. A chill ran down my spine, and I quickly shut and locked the door. I tried to shake off the uneasy feeling, telling myself I was just on edge from all the ghost stories I'd been reading lately. As night fell, I decided to call it quits on unpacking and relax with a movie. I curled up on the couch with a bowl of popcorn, scrolling through my options. That's when the power went out. The sudden darkness was disorienting. I fumbled for my phone, using its flashlight to navigate to the kitchen where I kept some candles. As I was lighting them, I heard something that made my blood run cold. Footsteps. Coming from the apartment above me. Now, that wouldn't normally be cause for alarm. Except for one thing, I knew for a fact that the upstairs apartment was vacant. The landlord had told me it was being renovated and wouldn't be occupied for months. I stood there, frozen, listening intently. The footsteps moved slowly, deliberately, crossing the length of the apartment above. Then they stopped, right over where I was standing. Tap. 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 It sounded like someone was gently knocking on their floor, my ceiling. I held my breath, wondering if I was imagining things. Then it came again, louder this time. Tap. 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 My heart was racing. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was just the pipes or the old house settling. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. Someone or something was up there. I grabbed my phone, ready to call the police, only to find I had no signal. Of course. Because that's how these things always go, right? Taking a deep breath, I decided to go check the circuit breaker in the basement. Maybe if I could get the power back on, I could call for help. I grabbed a flashlight and slowly made my way out of my apartment and down the stairs. The basement was like something out of a horror movie. Dirt floor, low ceiling, the air thick with the smell of mold and decay. My flashlight beam cut through the darkness, casting long, menacing shadows. I found the circuit breaker easily enough, but as I reached out to open it, I heard something that made me freeze. "Sarah," a voice whispered, so close it could have been right next to my ear. "We've been waiting for you." I spun around, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst out of my chest. But there was no one there. Just darkness and shadows. With shaking hands, I flipped the switches on the circuit breaker. Nothing happened. The power stayed off. That's when I noticed something on the wall behind the circuit box. At first, I thought it was just mold or water damage. But as I looked closer, I realized it was writing. Scratched into the wall itself, barely visible in the dim light, "Welcome home, Sarah. You can't leave now." I stumbled backwards, my mind reeling. How did they know my name? What did they mean I couldn't leave? I ran back upstairs, no longer caring about being quiet. I just needed to get out of there. But when I reached my apartment door, I found it wide open. I was sure I had closed it behind me. Heart pounding, I entered cautiously. The candles I had lit were still burning, casting flickering shadows on the walls. But something was different. It took me a moment to realize what it was. All of my unpacked belongings, pictures, books, clothes, they were gone. The apartment looked exactly as it had when I first moved in that morning. Empty. As if I had never been there at all. "No," I whispered, panic rising in my throat. "This isn't possible." That's when I saw it. A figure, standing in the corner of the room. Tall, unnaturally thin, its limbs too long and bent at odd angles. It was facing the wall, perfectly still. I should have run. Every instinct in my body was screaming at me to flee. But I was frozen in place, unable to move, unable to even breathe. Slowly, impossibly slowly, the figure began to turn. I caught a glimpse of pale, waxy skin, of a mouth that was far too wide, filled with needle-like teeth. And its eyes. God, its eyes. They were black, endless voids that seemed to draw me in, promising an eternity of darkness and terror. "Welcome home, Sarah," it said, its voice a horrifying mixture of whispers and screams. "We're going to have so much fun together." I ran. I ran faster than I ever have in my life, out of the apartment, down the stairs, out of the building. I didn't stop running until I reached the police station, gasping for air, probably looking like a madwoman. The police, of course, didn't believe me. They went to check out the apartment, only to find it completely normal. My belongings were all there, undisturbed. There was no writing in the basement, no sign of any intruders. They chalked it up to stress, maybe a vivid nightmare brought on by sleeping in a new place. But I know what I saw. I know what I experienced. I never went back to that apartment. I left everything behind, moved in with a friend, tried to put it all behind me. But I can't shake the feeling that it's not over. Sometimes, late at night, I swear I can hear that distorted giggle, coming from just outside my window. I see shadows move in ways they shouldn't, catch glimpses of impossibly long limbs disappearing around corners. And sometimes, in my dreams, I'm back in that apartment. But it's different, twisted. The rooms go on forever, filled with whispering shadows and lurking horrors. And always, always, there's that figure, waiting for me, smiling with its too wide mouth, its void-like eyes promising an eternity of terror. You'll come back to us, Sarah, it says in my nightmares. You can't escape. Not really. This is your home now. I wake up screaming every time, drenched in sweat, the echo of that horrible voice lingering in my mind. I don't know what to do. I don't know if I'm going crazy or if there's really something out there, something that has marked me as its own. All I know is that I don't feel safe anymore. Not in my home, not anywhere. Because how do you escape something that can invade your very dreams? How do you run from a horror that might not be real, but feels more terrifying than anything in the waking world? I'm writing this down as a warning, I suppose. To anyone out there who might be experiencing something similar, you're not alone. And to anyone who's looking for a new place to live, be careful. Be very, very careful. Because you never know what might be waiting for you behind that door. Sometimes, late at night, when the world is quiet and the shadows seem to move on their own, I find myself wondering, what if I had never left that apartment? What if everything that's happened since then is just a comforting illusion? What if I'm still there, trapped in that twisted, nightmare version of my home, just dreaming that I escaped? And then I hear it. That giggle. That horrible, distorted giggle that haunts my dreams. And I know, deep in my soul, that this isn't over. That it will never be over. They're still out there, waiting. And someday, somehow, they'll find a way to bring me back home. This is Sarah, signing off for Silent Screams. Stay safe out there, and remember, always check who's knocking before you open the door. You never know what might be waiting on the other side. But my story doesn't end there. Oh no, it was just the beginning of a nightmare that seems to have no end. You see, after I shared my experience, strange things started happening. Not just to me, but to people who had heard or read about my story. It started with emails and messages from viewers of Silent Screams. They described eerily similar experiences, knocks at the door with no one there, giggling in empty hallways, glimpses of that tall, twisted figure in mirrors or windows. At first, I thought they were just copycats, people letting their imaginations run wild after hearing a scary story. But then came the photos. Blurry, distorted images captured on phones or security cameras. In each one, barely visible but undeniably there, was that figure. Long limbs, too wide mouth, eyes like black holes. And always, always, it seemed to be looking directly at the camera. Directly at us. One night, about a month after I shared my story, I woke up to find my phone buzzing with notifications. Hundreds of them, all from people who had watched the Silent Screams episode. They were all saying the same thing, it's here. It found me. Help. I tried calling some of them, but no one answered. The next day, reports started coming in from all over the country. People missing, homes found empty with no signs of struggle. And in each case, the last thing they had done was watch or read about my experience. The police were baffled. How could so many people disappear all at once, with no apparent connection except for a scary story they had heard? They questioned me for hours, but I had no answers to give them. Only a growing sense of dread and guilt. Had I somehow unleashed something? By sharing my story, had I opened a door that was never meant to be opened? As the disappearances continued, I started noticing changes in my own environment. The layout of my new apartment would subtly shift when I wasn't looking. I'd enter a room only to find it wasn't the room I thought it was. Objects would move on their own, always when just out of my line of sight. And the dreams. God, the dreams got worse. I found myself back in that twisted version of my old apartment, but now it was endless. Corridors that went on forever, rooms that defied the laws of physics. And everywhere I turned, I saw them. The missing people. Trapped, like me, in this nightmare realm. They pleaded with me, their voices a cacophony of terror and accusation. Why did you bring us here, Sarah? Why did you do this to us? I would wake up screaming, only to find myself unsure if I was truly awake or just in another layer of the dream. Reality began to feel thin, fragile, like a veneer that could be peeled away at any moment to reveal the horrors lurking beneath. One night, as I sat huddled in my bed, jumping at every shadow and creak, my phone buzzed. A text message from an unknown number. Time to come home, Sarah. We're all waiting for you. Attached was a photo of my old apartment building. But it was wrong. Twisted, warped, its windows glowing with an eldritch light that hurt to look at. And there, in every window, were faces. Hundreds of faces, pressed against the glass, their eyes wide with terror. I recognized some of them. The people who had gone missing after hearing my story. They were there, trapped in that impossible building, silently screaming for help. As I stared at the photo, my blood running cold, I felt something change in the air around me. The walls of my bedroom began to warp and twist. The shadows lengthened, reaching for me with grasping tendrils. And from every dark corner came that sound, that horrible, distorted giggle. I wanted to run, but where could I go? How do you escape something that can follow you into your very dreams? How do you fight an enemy that can bend reality itself? As the room dissolved around me, transforming into that nightmarish version of my old apartment, I heard that voice again. The one that had whispered to me in the basement all those months ago. Welcome back, Sarah. Welcome home. The fun is just beginning. I felt cold, impossibly long fingers wrap around my wrist, and I knew that this time, there would be no waking up. No escape. This was real, and it was only the beginning of an eternity of horrors. As the last vestiges of my reality slipped away, I had one last, terrifying thought. Who will be next? Who will hear my story and be drawn into this nightmare? So if you're reading this, if you're watching this, be warned. The nightmare doesn't end when you finish this story. It's only just beginning. They're out there, waiting, watching. And now that you know about them, they know about you too. Every knock at your door, every shadow in the corner of your eye, every strange sound in the night, it could be them. Coming for you. Coming to bring you home. Sweet dreams, dear viewers. And remember, you're never truly alone. This is Sarah, signing off for the last time. If you're seeing this, it means they've finally taken me. Don't look for me. Don't try to help. Just be careful. Be very, very careful. Because now that you've heard my story, you're part of it too. And they'll be coming for you next. I don't know how long I've been here in this twisted version of my old apartment. Time doesn't work the same way in this place. Sometimes it feels like I've been trapped for years. Other times it seems like only moments have passed since I was taken. But I know one thing for certain, I'm not alone. They're all here with me. The viewers, the readers, everyone who heard my story and was drawn into this nightmare. I see them sometimes, fleeting glimpses in impossible corridors or reflections in windows that shouldn't exist. Their faces are always twisted in terror, silently screaming for a help that will never come. But it's not just them. There are others here. The entities that brought us to this place. I catch sight of them more often now, their elongated limbs and too wide mouths becoming almost familiar in their otherworldly horror. They watch us, always watch us, their void-like eyes drinking in our fear like it's the sweetest nectar. I've tried to understand this place, to make sense of its twisted logic. The apartment seems to go on forever, rooms sprouting from rooms in ways that defy physics. Stairs lead to nowhere, doors open onto brick walls or endless drops into darkness. And always, there's that feeling of being watched. One day, if you can call it a day in this timeless hell, I found something. A journal, hidden in a drawer that hadn't existed the moment before. The handwriting was familiar, it was mine. But I didn't remember writing it. As I read, I felt my grip on reality, already tenuous, start to slip even further. The journal detailed experiments, observations about this place and the entities that rule it. But it wasn't just one set of entries. It was hundreds, maybe thousands, each one signed with my name but containing memories I didn't have. That's when I understood the true horror of my situation. This wasn't the first time I'd been here. I'd been trapped in this loop for God knows how long, living through this nightmare over and over, only to have my memories wiped clean and the whole thing start again. But why? What was the purpose of this endless cycle of terror? As if in answer to my unspoken question, I heard that giggle. That horrible, distorted sound that had haunted me from the beginning. I turned to see one of them standing in the corner of the room, its impossibly long fingers trailing along the wall. Why? I asked, surprised at the steadiness of my own voice. Why are you doing this? The creature's mouth split into that terrifying grin, rows of needle-like teeth gleaming in the dim light. When it spoke, its voice was like nails on a chalkboard, a cacophony of whispers and screams. Why do you humans tell scary stories, Sarah? Why do you seek out fear, crave it, even as it terrifies you? I didn't have an answer. The creature continued, its head tilting at an angle that should have been impossible. We feed on it. Your fear, your terror, it sustains us. And you, my dear Sarah, you're our perfect lure. Your story, your fear, it draws them in. And the cycle continues. I felt sick. All those people, trapped here because of me. Because of my story. How do I stop it? I demanded. How do I end this? The creature's grin widened impossibly. You can't. The story never ends, Sarah. It just begins again. With that, it vanished, leaving me alone with the horrible truth. I was the bait in an eternal trap, drawing in victims for these entities to feed on. And there was nothing I could do to stop it. Or was there? As I stood there, the weight of this revelation crushing me, I had a thought. A dangerous, desperate thought. These entities fed on fear. They thrived on it, needed it. But what if? What if I stopped being afraid? It seemed impossible. How could I not be terrified in this nightmare realm? But as I thought about it, I realized something. In all my countless loops through this horror, Documented in that journal I didn't remember writing, I had always reacted with fear. I had always run, hidden, cowered. But I had never fought back. With a determination I didn't know I possessed, I began to move through the twisted apartment. But this time, instead of trying to hide from the horrors, I confronted them. When I saw a shadowy figure lurking in a corner, I walked straight toward it. When I heard that giggle, I laughed right back. At first, nothing seemed to change. The entities still appeared, still tormented me and the other trapped souls. But slowly, ever so slowly, I started to notice a difference. The apparitions became less frequent. The oppressive atmosphere of terror began to lift, if only slightly. And then I saw it. One of the entities, the same one that had spoken to me before, standing at the end of a long corridor. But something was different. It looked diminished somehow. Less solid, less real. "What are you doing?" it hissed, its voice lacking the power it had held before. I stood tall, looking it straight in its void-like eyes. "I'm not afraid anymore," I said, my voice ringing with a confidence I didn't entirely feel. "And without fear, you have no power here." The creature shrieked, a sound of fury, and was that fear? It lunged at me, its two long arms reaching, claws extended. But as it neared me, it seemed to dissolve, like smoke in the wind. I pressed on, moving through the twisted landscape of the apartment. Everywhere I went, I spread the message to the other trapped souls. "Don't be afraid," I told them. "They feed on fear. Without it, they're nothing." It wasn't easy. The entities fought back, redoubling their efforts to terrify us. They created new horrors, new torments. Many of the people trapped here were too far gone, too lost in their own terror to listen. But slowly, gradually, things began to change. The endless corridors began to shrink. The impossible rooms started to resolve into normal spaces. And the entities, they began to fade. I don't know how long the battle lasted. Time still had no meaning here. But eventually, I found myself standing in a normal apartment. My old apartment, looking exactly as it had the day I moved in. And I was alone. No entities. No trapped souls. Just silence. For a long moment, I stood there, hardly daring to believe it was over. Then, slowly, I made my way to the front door. My hand shook as I reached for the knob. What if this was just another trick? Another layer of the nightmare? I took a deep breath, steeling myself, and opened the door. Sunlight. Real, warm sunlight streamed in. I stepped out into a normal hallway, hearing the sounds of everyday life all around me. People talking, cars driving by outside, a dog barking in the distance. Normal sounds. Real sounds. As I made my way out of the building, I saw them. The people who had been trapped with me, all looking dazed and confused. Some were crying, others laughing in disbelief. We had done it. We had escaped. In the days that followed, we tried to make sense of what had happened. The authorities were baffled by the reappearance of so many missing people, all telling the same impossible story. Most wrote it off as some kind of mass hallucination or shared delusion. But we knew the truth. We had faced something beyond human understanding, and we had survived. As for me, I couldn't stay in that apartment. Too many memories, too much lingering fear. I moved away, tried to start a new life. But I couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't really over. Sometimes, late at night, I swear I can hear that giggle again. I see shadows move in ways they shouldn't. And I wonder, did we really win? Or did we just change the rules of their game? I've started writing again, documenting everything that happened. Not to scare people this time, but to warn them. To teach them how to fight back if the entities ever return. Because I know now that the real horror isn't the monsters lurking in the dark. It's the fear we carry inside us. Fear is the real enemy, the real trap. And the only way to truly escape is to face that fear head on. So if you're reading this, if you've heard my story, remember, you are stronger than your fears. No matter what terrors you face, no matter what nightmares haunt you, you have the power to overcome them. Don't run. Don't hide. Stand tall, look your fears in the eye, and say, I'm not afraid of you anymore. Because in the end, that's the only way to truly banish the darkness. As I sit here, writing these final words, I feel a sense of peace I haven't known in a long time. The entities are gone, their power broken. The nightmare is over. Or is it? Just as I'm about to close my journal, I hear something. A sound I had hoped never to hear again. That giggle. That horrible, distorted giggle. I spin around, my heart racing, to see a familiar figure standing in the corner of my room. Tall, impossibly thin, with a mouth that's far too wide. Did you really think it was over, Sarah? It asks, its voice a mixture of whispers and screams. Don't you know? The story never truly ends. As it steps towards me, its void-like eyes boring into mine, I feel the old fear rising up. But this time, I don't run. I don't cower. I stand my ground, meeting its gaze. You're right, I say, my voice steady. The story never ends. But I'm not afraid anymore. And that changes everything. For a moment, just a moment, I see something flicker in those bottomless eyes. Uncertainty. Maybe even fear. And as the entity reaches for me, as the world starts to twist and warp around us, I make a choice. I won't be the victim this time. I won't be the bait in their trap. This time, I'll be the hunter. So to anyone reading this, anyone who's heard my story and felt that chill of fear, be brave. Be strong. Because the real battle isn't fought in some nightmare realm or twisted reflection of reality. It's fought in our own minds, in our own hearts. And it's a battle we can win if we have the courage to face our fears. The entities are still out there, waiting in the shadows, hungry for our terror. But we don't have to feed them. We can fight back. We can win. And who knows? Maybe someday, we'll be the ones they fear. This is Sarah, signing off one last time. Stay strong, stay brave, and remember, the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. As I set down my pen, I feel a shift in the air. The entity is gone, but I know this isn't the end. It's just the beginning of a new chapter. A new battle. But this time, I'm ready. This time, I'm not alone. Because now you know. Now you're part of the story too. And together, we can face whatever horrors come our way. So sleep tight, dear readers. And if you hear a knock at your door in the dead of night, if you catch a glimpse of something impossible in the corner of your eye, remember, you're stronger than your fears. you have the power to fight back. And who knows? Maybe it's not us who should be afraid. Maybe, just maybe, it's them who should fear us. The end, or is it just the beginning?